Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
everyone. Hi. Welcome to this webinar. Hi, everyone who's coming in. My name is Akira. I'm here joined by many of us at Bright. We have Nerman, Artem, Tanya, and Art. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. So if you want to get slides and follow along here, you can absolutely do that. This is a little tiny URL because the link for Google Slides is very long. I promise this is not a virus. We are a security company. That'd be super gnarly if we gave you something. So this is just a link to the slides. You can also take a picture of this if you want later on and take a look at the slides so you don't get too lost. All right, so here's what you're going to need today. You're going to need a GitHub account. You're going to need a text editor, which is optional, but we can look through the code a little bit easier on your end if you want to take a look at that. Also, you will need Docker Desktop. If you don't have those things, I suggest going to get them right now. We're going to teach you a few concepts. We're going to do some top-down teaching. So until the actual workshop section starts, you'll have time to download either a text editor, Docker Desktop, or get yourself a GitHub account. And yes, this is going to be recorded. Okay, so I like to frame what you're learning as a win, as opposed to oh, here's the thing you're going to learn. It's like, this is actually a huge win that you're going to get. So we're going to have a bunch of wins today. First thing is going to be learning about application security. So that's a really big win for you in your career. The second win you're going to get is an intro to unit security testing and what that means for you as a developer. The third win will be about Bright. So this will be like a tooling win. You can learn some new tools today. The last part will be, of course, the SecTester workshop itself. This will be a hands-on wins, plural. What I will say is that this tool is in alpha, so we are probably going to encounter a couple of blips and blobs along the way. Please be patient with us. We also really want your feedback. If you're like, hey, this section made sense and this section didn't really work for me and I want to know why this was the way this was, please let us know. We are actively developing this feature and we're just really happy that you're here, because on the one hand, it's there's the alpha version, which is where it stands, and there's what it is turning into, which is really exciting. So it's cool that y'all get to come and be here at the very beginning of this process with us. So thank you again. And please have patience with us as we all work together to make this work out. And then, of course, the last section will be questions. I'll try to answer a couple of them live at the very end, and that'll be a win for you as far as participation goes. So even if maybe, for example, you don't get the entire workshop in your brain, I don't expect you to, we only have an hour, you can at least get a couple wins, right? So to that end, I want to know in the chat, what win do you most want to focus on today? What do you really want to get out of this workshop? And I definitely want to hear that in the chat. What do you want to get out of the workshop? What do you want to learn most about? What win do you really want to walk away from this with? I think that if we can all focus on one or two wins for ourselves, then we'll come away from the workshop super satisfied. Okay, so here's me. Just a quick note about me. I work in developer relations at Bright Security. I'm a tech educator and a educator in general. I have taught students of all ages and all skill levels about two main things. One is music and one is technology for over 10 years. So I've probably taught hundreds of students, and I'm super glad to be teaching you today. I'm always looking for feedback too of how I can be a better educator, but it's a really big passion of mine. I just really like to, I love to teach. What can I say? I love to impart my knowledge, and hopefully you'll come away with some new knowledge today. I'm also a perpetual learner. I actually just started my own computer science degree at Hamming College. I'm very excited about it. It's really rigorous and I'm really enjoying it so far. And I'm always learning. I'm always trying new things. A lot of what I am teaching you today is relatively new to me. I've had a few months practice on it, but it's I'm always trying to learn new things. And I find the best way to learn something is by teaching. So kind of goes hand in hand. All right, so let's do our first win. I hope you're all ready to have a first major win. This win is about learning about AppSec. So what is application security? So application security is an umbrella term that is used to describe anything and everything that has to do with writing and shipping secure software. AppSec has always historically been owned by the security team or by penetration testers. But nowadays, actually what is going on is that developers are needing to own it. And on that note, what does that mean that developers have to do? Well, one thing is that developers have to now learn how to integrate security tooling into their own pipelines. They have to learn how to integrate security tooling into their own workflows. They have to understand what secure coding even means. That's really tough, right? Because there's not a lot of education around this, which is another reason I'm so passionate about teaching this subject. It doesn't really get taught in schools. It doesn't get taught in colleges. It certainly doesn't get taught in boot camps. So it's like all of these AppSec activities, things like secure code review, things like threat modeling, things like installing tools like Dast and SAS tools. Those are now in the hands of developers, and we don't really know what good AppSec is, right? What differentiates good AppSec from bad AppSec? In my opinion, good AppSec is the AppSec that happens. And what I mean that is that sometimes developers can become so overwhelmed with the security requirements of code and what they have to now do for software security that they will maybe not do anything at all, which is a problem, right? So in my opinion, any kind of AppSec that you do is good AppSec. And of course, then you have to make sure that you're implementing whatever tool you're using, whatever maybe software design pattern that you're using correctly. But a good place to start is just to get started. I'm going to check the chat really quickly, make sure that we're all in good shape. Yep. Okay, cool. It looks like we have several questions about whether this is being recorded. The answer to that is yes, it is being recorded, and we will have that for you afterward. Okay. Why is AppSec important? So in the rush to develop features, fix bugs, and maintain software, security can and often does take a back seat. So the earlier you detect security issues, the easier it is to fix. And then one of the great parts of this is that you will not have as much tech debt. So again, like we said, whose responsibility is it now? It's the developer's responsibility, not necessarily fully, but a lot more security requirements and security mindsets are being placed now onto developers. And there's also a big issue between the communication between the development teams and the application security teams that sometimes people don't really know who is in charge of what. And then of course breaches can happen, and then it costs your company a bunch of money. It looks really bad on whoever caused the breach, and it's not a fun time. So I'm actually curious, Tanya, if you are here, can you tell us anything else that you want to maybe add about why is AppSec important?
Yes. So this is funny because obviously this is my favorite topic. After so someone's asking about e-certificates, and are we giving those after the workshop, Akira?
Yeah,
and then I'll answer. Everyone is getting an e-certificate after the webinar. Okay, so AppSec's important for a whole bunch of reasons, like all the ones Akira said, but basically cybercrime has completely exploded because one, it's really hard to catch people who are performing crimes on the internet. Reputation's very complicated. And so there's not that much risk. Like when you go and rob a bank and you have a gun, people can shoot you. And quite frankly, death seems scary to me. And it turns out lots of other people feel that way too. But when you do a cyber crime, you're not going to get shot while you're doing it generally. And the other reason is because there's so much potential for stealing and other types of crime on the internet because we don't have extremely secure apps everywhere on the internet, just some places. Most, I want to give happier statistics, but there's still lots of stuff that's quite old on the internet that hasn't been updated and resecured. There's still lots of people releasing applications all the time that haven't even had like just one scan and then like 2 bug fixes done on them. They just have had 0 attempts to ensure they are secure. And so until things get better, criminals will continue to flourish on the internet. So we are hoping, and I mean, me, Akira, everyone on this call, and everyone that works at Bright are hoping that we can ensure that we can provide something that will help you make your apps more secure. Essentially, like this really matters to all of us. Is that good, Akira, or is there?
Yeah.
Were the
There's also
okay?
a question that I want to answer that's been put in the Q&A that I think will be really good maybe for us to weigh in right now before we move on to other things. The question is from Zhao, and the question is, how do we apply security patterns to software design patterns? So maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So there's a couple of things that are like best practices that are a good thing to implement. We won't go into all of them right now because it's a lot, but the organization called OWASP, OWASP, has a fantastic list called the OWASP Top 10. And that list essentially tells software developers like the top 10 security vulnerabilities that we should be guarding against right now. And inside of that OWASP top 10, there are remediation steps and suggestions for patterns to take in your software for how to guard against these particular issues. Also, there are security courses that you can take. For example, we have one on wehackpurple.com that is all about secure coding. And there's some things that would be inside of there that are really important. Like, for example, input validation is incredibly important. Output encoding is incredibly important. Doing things like having proper authentication and authorization, incredibly important. And all of these things tie in, again, usually to the OWASP top 10 list. So that's where I would refer you to, is to learn about the OWASP top 10, take a look at those resources and dive a little bit deeper in for yourself. And also check out wehackpurple.com, which will give you a whole secure coding course that you can learn about as well. All right, let me see here. We have a bunch of other questions. Let's keep going though, because I don't want to get too terribly stuck, but we will, Eddie, Mohammed, and Kumar, I see your questions. We'll come back to those in a little bit. So maybe after this next section. All right, win number 2. Learning about unit security testing. So what is unit security testing? So what we're trying to do here with unit security testing is we are trying to integrate these AppSec practices with developers as soon as possible. One way we can do that is through a tool called a Dast tool. So a Dast stands for Dynamic Application Security Testing. And what a Dast does is it tests your application from the outside in. It's called also black box testing, which essentially attacks your app the way that an attacker would to see where it can get in and where it can corrupt data and where it can steal files and things of this nature. Normally, tools like a Dast are only integrated into the software development lifecycle after integration tests and right before release. But what we're trying to do today, and what we're doing with SecTester, is we are integrating our Dast engine, so the thing that makes the Dast run here at Bright, into end-to-end security testing. So inside of that end-to-end test, we have security unit tests that we're going to run a little bit later on. And that way, when you're actually writing your code, you can start writing these security tests, especially like how we talked about earlier, the OWASP top 10, maybe there's a particular vulnerability that your AppSec team really wants you to guard against at this particular moment in time. You can actually start to test for that as soon as you are writing unit tests, which is actually quite revolutionary. I'm very excited about this because no one else has integrated a Dast tool this early on in the process. So all of this falls under the umbrella of a term called shifting left. And shifting left is a sort of a buzzword in the AppSec industry right now and the InfoSec community in general. What that means is normally, again, a lot of security tools and pen testing and security, anything really was done on almost the far right side of the SDLC. So right before production, pre-production, right after production, And that's too late. So we're trying to shift it as left as we possibly can, such that we can find these issues earlier and remediate them earlier. So it makes developers happier because AppSec teams aren't like dumping a bunch of work on them. It eliminates a lot of tech debt. And of course, it secures your applications much better so that your businesses don't have as much of a possibility of getting breached. So that's what we like to talk about when we say shift left. And here's right here where the unit testing frameworks are, right here on code change and commit. So, like I said, in the olden days, which is like a year ago, all the way here on production and scheduled would be where you would test for all of these issues. You'd have cross-site scripting, OSI, LFI, SQL injection, CSRF. But now you can actually shift all of those left. So now in the CI/CD, you can take care of SQLi injection and CSRF. Then even more far left here on unit testing, you can take care of cross-site scripting, OSI, and LFI as well. So it's actually quite exciting. You don't have to wait until production to dump a bunch of work on the developers from the security team, which is very exciting. Okay, two things that I want to do. In learning, there are a couple of theories that actually really help. The first theory that I want to talk about is that when you try to recall something that you just learned, you will have a much greater ability to actually remember that thing. So in the chat, can you please put maybe one or two things that you remember that we just talked about? What did you just learn? What is something that you are taking away from these first two sections? I want to hear. Awesome. Shift left. Wonderful. Samay says, the process of security then begins early, giving time to have a well-secured app on production. Beautiful. Dast to unit test from Sal. Perfect. Brian says, Dast simulates attacks to find vulnerabilities. Awesome. Okay. I can almost guarantee you that anything you're recalling right now, you're going to absolutely remember beyond just by the end of this webinar. You'll remember this for a long time. OWASP, top 10 security vulnerabilities from Herbert. Vasilis, it takes a lot to go on prod. Yes, facts though, for real. Okay, good. Everyone, thank you so much for doing that. Okay, let's go on then to tooling. It looks like Tanya answered a bunch of questions in the chat. So if you asked a question earlier on the Q&A or in the chat, it looks like that our team is keeping up with that quite well. Thank you, Tanya and team. So let's talk about win number 3, tooling. So this is the tool that we're going to use. It's from our team at Bright Security. And I want to talk a little bit about Bright in general, so you know who we are. So like I said, Bright is a Dast. We stand for Dynamic Application Security Testing Tool. And we test your application from the outside in. And I'm only repeating this because this might be unfamiliar to some of us. So this is, again, it's called black box testing. We don't actually look at your code. We look at the running application and test it from the outside in, the same way that a malicious actor would. Now, why is using a Dast important? Let me tell you. So anyone on the internet, anyone can take a Dast tool like Bright or other Dast tools. They can point them at your application and find security vulnerabilities. You don't have to have given your permission for this. Now, excuse me, this doesn't make that legal. It doesn't necessarily make it a good idea to do that because you could get caught. But if I can point a Dast tool at your application and find the security vulnerabilities, anyone can point a Dast tool at your application and find the security vulnerabilities. So it's a really, really good idea to make sure that you are screening your apps with Dast on a regular basis, because anyone can do it. It's not a good idea necessarily to wait for the pen tester to come and say, oh, by the way, you've had these vulnerabilities that anyone could have found with this very simple tool, and you've had them for 3 years. Not a great look. Our tool is very easy to use. One thing I'll mention about Bright is that you don't have to be a security expert to use it. Other Dast tools on the market are very good. They're solid tools. And if you don't have a lot of security background, it can be confusing on how to use them. That's something that I really like about Bright, is that I can go in. I didn't know a lot about security actually when I started at this company, and it was quite intuitive to understand how this tool worked. We can scan web apps, we can scan APIs, we can scan microservices, we can do authentication. it's quite fast. So Dast tools also have kind of a bad rap for being incredibly slow. Our full-blown scans can potentially run for a few hours, but other Dast tools will run 4 days. So that is also quite an improvement. I'm going to move on from this slide, but if you want to take a picture and just learn a little bit more about what all these other things mean, we don't have time to go into all of them right now. Feel free to take a picture of this slide and you can look at that a little later in your own time. Okay, it looks like in the chat really quickly, I want to ask you all, what problems does practicing application security solve? So what does practicing AppSec, doing all these security activities, whether it's learning about secure coding or doing secure code reviews or using a Dast tool, what problems does that solve? What things are not an issue anymore because you're practicing application security? Andrea says, public relations nightmares later. Yes, that is so true. I love that answer. If you are breached, your company not only will probably lose a lot of money, they will have a PR nightmare. It is not fun to recover from a data breach. I know Uber just had one recently, and it's going to be really a tough road for them. I feel quite bad for them. Other ones, of course, well, there's so many, but I'm sure you could look up companies with data breaches, and you can sort of see the consumer confidence in that company goes down, and it's very expensive to recover from. Let's read a couple more out. Late detections of vulnerabilities from Patty. Yes, that's true. So you can actually detect vulnerabilities early and to detect them often. John Oliver says human error. Yes, it's so true. You can actually get rid of a lot of the issues of human error by practicing application security procedures early on in the software development lifecycle. So this is really good. Okay, these are all really good answers. Thank you, everybody. The last one I want to say is, again, reducing costs and keeping a good reputation. Absolutely. Okay, great job, everyone. Thank you. All right, now it's time to go to our workshop. Huzzah! We had so many wins. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to this repository, and this will be the repository that we're gonna hack on. So I'm gonna put this here in the chat, github.com/neuralegion/sectester-js-demo. So you may be wondering, I thought your company was called Bright. Why are we going to a place called Neuralegion? The answer to that is we used to be called Neuralegion, and we changed our name to Bright. And sometimes when you do a name change, it can take a little while to migrate over all of the things that need to be changed as far as the name goes. And right now our GitHub just is still listed under Neuralegion. So it is us. It's not just some random company. This is us. Okay, so I'm going to go to this repo, and if everyone could please follow along with me, that would be fantastic. And let's go here.
May I interrupt for a second? You're a bit out of focus, Akira. Can you refocus your camera, please?
Yeah, like me personally is out of focus.
Yeah, you, the human, somehow you became kind of blurry, and you look really good when you're not blurry.
Oh, thanks. Okay, it looks like people can't copy from the
Oh no.
Let's see here what's going on here. So people can actually copy from the chat. Let me try one more time. Is that better, Tanya? Am I less blurry?
No, you're still super blur. But I think you should worry about the link first.
Yeah, I'm gonna close my camera and maybe undo it in a second.
Okay. There, someone added it.
Perfect. Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so what is this? This is a demo project for the SecTester JavaScript SDK framework with some installation and usage examples. So SecTester essentially is a tool that, again, allows you to integrate the Bright dynamic application security testing tool, so the Dast engine, into unit end-to-end tests. So if you have this open on your machine, or excuse me, on your web browser, can you please just type like, I have it open, or like, we're good, or yes, or something in the chat, just so I know that we're all kind of on the same page. Okay, cool. We got a bunch of yes, 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 yes. We're good. Awesome. Okay, thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Oh, we got some people already cloned the repo. Well done. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fork and clone this repo. So if you don't know how to fork a repo, you go up here to the very top and you push fork. And it will ask you, where do you want to fork it? And I'm going to fork it into my home directory here. Excuse me, into my home home profile here. And I'm going to push create fork. Awesome. Woohoo. Okay. So the second thing we need to do is we need to get a bright API key. So how do we do that? Well, you can scroll down here where it says get a bright API key. And when it says on step 1, register for free account at Bright signup page, you need to go to that link. You're going to go to that section and you're going to sign up with either GitHub, Google, or your email. So I'm going to do it with email. My name is Akira Brand. Huzzah. Akira.brand plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a cool trick that I like to teach people is that if you have to make a new email account on anything that is a Google hosted domain, but like you have to make a new account for some reason, you can do a plus and then just some numbers, and Google will recognize that as a new email, which I think is kind of cool. That's not really related to the workshop, but I think that's just like a really cool little trick. Okay, so we're going to do create a free account. Over here on my browser, over on this left. Whoops. Let's see here. Sorry, I accidentally unshared my screen. Here we go. I'm going to pull this over here. So you're going to need to essentially go to your email and verify your email, which I'm going to do over here in private so that you can't all see my email inbox. Not that it's all that exciting, but it is what it is. All right, so here we are. Akira brand plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at brightsec.com. Put in my password, sign in. Okay, so what you need to do first is you're going to create an organization. I'm going to say this is my awesome organization. Create. Now, if you have already passed this part, then it's okay. But this is our setup wizard. You actually don't need to use the setup wizard for this particular workshop. So if you saw this and it said required setup, that's okay. If you have the CLI on your machine now and you have a repeater, it's not a problem, but you actually don't need to do this. So I'm going to push skip the onboarding wizard. Yes, I want to proceed. Okay. So to get a bright API key, what you do is you're going to go up here to your accounts and you're going to click on user settings. Then you're going to scroll down to manage your user API keys. And I'm going to push create API key. I'm going to say this is the SecTester workshop API key. Because we really care about security, we're just going to give it all the permissions possible. And we're going to push create. So make sure you save your API key somewhere safe because you will not be able to access it later. So I've currently just put mine on my notepad. It's not the best way to save an API key, but we're going to do something a little more secure in just a moment. Okay, now let's go down to the next section of the README. So, like I said, we're going to actually save the API key in a little bit more of a secure location. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our settings. Where are my settings? Let's see. Oh, shoot. I had this earlier, but now I can't find my settings. Okay, so then here we go. So we're going to go to, sorry, now my short-term memory has forgotten what to do. Settings, security, secrets, actions. Here we go. Settings, security, secrets, actions. And we're going to push here new repository secrets. We're going to call it bright all in caps, write underscore token, and then I'm going to paste my API key right there. And I'm going to blow away this API key after this workshop. So if you copied it and want to do nefarious things, like it's not going to happen in 45 minutes. But up until then, knock yourself out. Okay, so here we are. We have our repository secret in a more secure location. That way we're not just putting our API key all over our repo. We don't necessarily want to do that. Okay, now, oh, I forgot to mention we have to clone this down. I apologize for that. So you're going to clone this down, and then you're going to go to your local version of this project, and then in the command line, you're going to install the dependencies. All right. Let me just double check the chat really quick, see if there's any questions. Looks like we're in good shape. Oh, we have someone that's having a missile attack launched. Gosh, good luck. Okay, be safe. All right, so go to your local version of this project, and then you're gonna install the dependencies with Npmci. Does everybody know how to do that? If you don't, go ahead and put in the chat, and we will help you. So what you would do is in your command line, you can go to cd. Actually, I need to clone it down. Get this, get clone, get clone. Okay, cd SecTester JS demo. Okay, let me make this a little smaller so people can see my actual terminal here. So here I've cloned down. Whoops. I don't want that to happen. I have cloned down my SecTester JS demo. I already did it earlier. But then right here, once you're inside of this directory, you're going to want to install the dependencies with Mpmci. I'm probably going to get some kind of message that says you've already installed these dependencies, but you will probably not get that. Oh, here we go. Maybe it's going to update. Looks like it's going to update instead. Is anybody else having any issues? Let me just kind of scroll through here. It looks like
no, you do not need a GitHub Enterprise account to access the security settings. Free GitHub accounts should have the security settings as well.
Yeah. Abner, can you check for Brian to see about resending him a verification email? Brian, would you be willing to put the email you used to register in the chat, and we can check into that for you? If you want, you don't have to. Okay, it looks like there might have been a little confusion with the, okay, I understand, Brian, I understand. Okay, let me see here. Just Unix and Linux-based OS is use sudo. Okay, yeah. So if you cannot install, feel free to use. I mean, you know, it's up to you, but you can use sudo npmci, which will help. Okay, let's go on. If you're with us, please type like I'm here, or like I'm good, or okay, or something like that, so that I know we can move on. Otherwise we will kind of hang back for a second. Okay, we got a couple I'm goods. I'm here, okay, so yeah, okay, cool. All right. Okay, let's give it a little time. All good here, open up the project. Okay, cool. All right. So next thing we're gonna do, what you can do is, if you have done the thing I recommended with putting your Bright token in the GitHub secrets, then this next section is not for you. But if you did not do that, we're going to put the Bright token directly into your repo. This isn't the best practice, but it is something that can work if you absolutely need it to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run a command that is cp, which stands for copy.env.example.env. Now, what does this mean? So what this essentially does, as you can see here, inside of this code base, there is a example env file. Let's see here. In this env file, it has the name for the Postgres user, the Postgres password, the Bright host name, and then a line for the Bright token, which would be your API key. So that we don't necessarily have to explain like what each one of those means and you have to figure all that out. What we're doing is we're just copying that example file into a new file called env. So I want to list out and make sure that my env file now exists. It looks like it does. Now, in a text editor, you're going to open that .env file. So let's see. Sometimes Visual Studio, I was thinking it wasn't going to work. Sometimes Visual Studio Code does this directly from the command line, and sometimes it doesn't. So it didn't do it today, so we're going to redo it. Okay. We're going to open this up in our Visual Studio Code. Great. Okay. Now we're going to look for our .env file. So as you can see here, here's the copied env example in the env. And you can now paste your Bright token, your API key there if you want to do it this way. So there's two ways of essentially configuring this Bright API key. The first way is through the secrets in GitHub, and the second is directly into your repo this way through your .env file. If you do choose to do it this way and you want to push this to GitHub, I would definitely make a git ignore file and put your .env file into that git ignore. Okay, great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run Docker. So Docker is going to actually boot up the little sample application that we're going to run tests on today. And the way that we do that is with Docker compose up -d. Now we're going to try an experiment. I'm probably going to run Docker compose up -d and it's not going to work. Okay, let me back up a little bit. So here in my .env file on line 4, I have pasted my API key. Okay, now going back to the next section, Docker compose up -d. Let's go ahead and put that in our terminal window. But first, you're going to need to boot up Docker Desktop. So if you remember at the beginning, I said you needed Docker, and this is why you need Docker. So this one I actually don't. I'm going to remove so I can open up the port. Okay, so we have Docker up and Docker compose up -d. Now, if you are on an M1 Mac, you might see this really weird thing that's about to happen, but maybe again, you won't. Okay, so it didn't happen for me this time. What I will say, sometimes if you are on an M1 Mac, Docker doesn't play well with the M1 chip. And so if you are having problems, like if it's throwing a ton of errors at you, I'm going to put a couple commands in the chat right now to essentially install Rosetta onto your system and then allow the actual OS in your shell to be changed to a Linux 64 system. That's what Rosetta does. Yeah, Kamir, definitely watch out for the M1 chip. I have an M1 chip and it's actually caused me a lot of grief. So I would maybe not recommend it, but that's up to you, right? Do your research. If it's the right decision for you, then it's the right decision for you. Okay, cool. Tanya says she has really way less bad from a really old Mac. Mine works all right with an M1 chip. Right on. Okay, that's good. M2 owners. Well, if you're M2, then you're just too fancy for me. I don't know. All right, let's go on before we get too deep into the weeds with M1s versus M2s. Okay, so now we're going to run the DB schema and you're going to execute a migration as shown here. This command is in the same place that you've been doing all your other commands, and it is npm run migration up. Okay, so who actually can tell me what this means? Does anybody have an idea? Or if like maybe Art wants to chime in, or Tanya wants to chime in, or Artem wants to tell us what this does. I mean, I know what it does, but I kind of want to hear from the class.
If no one else answers, I'll answer. I'm sort of a keener, but I want to let the audience answer. I
Yeah.
know what I am. I know I'm a keener, and it's okay.
It's good to have self-awareness, you know. All right, we got data migration, some DB migration, migrate DB schemas in a DB server. Yeah, exactly. Migrate the database models to initialize them. Awesome. Yeah, well done, everyone. That's exactly so. Exactly so. Well done. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that when you're going through tutorials and going through workshops and people are just telling you to run commands, coming from a security mindset, it's always a good idea to understand what the command does so that you're not just running random commands in your terminal prompt. Beautiful. Okay, now let's boot this thing up. Let's do npm start. Hopefully this works. Fingers crossed. Woohoo. All right, let's go. Let's go. Okay, application is running on port 3000. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to HTTP localhost 3000/API. I'm going to put that here in the chat. Okay, cool. So here we are. We are now in the demo application. Ta-da! It worked. Hooray! Okay, so I'm going to go to post users and just make sure that this thing actually works, right? So we have a request body here. First name and the value is a string. The last name is the value of the string. I want to try it out and make sure that when I'm posting to my API, the thing actually works. So my first name, Akira. My last name is normally Brand, but it's going to be Is Awesome. Ta-da! Put that in the proper case here for JavaScript. All right, and let's push execute. Let's make sure it works. Hey, look at that. It worked. Post. Application JSON, content type, first name Akira, last name Is Awesome. Request URL. Fantastic. Okay, well done, everyone. If you are getting that, can you please push like yes or okay or something along those lines if you've gotten this far? I'll just wait for a second. Still here. Oh, Isaac has a frowny face. Maybe it's not what I think it is. Okay.
Isaac is stuck with the migration. There's a migration error. Art or Artem, would you be able to help with the migration error for Isaac?
Yeah, maybe they can come in on the chat and just type some stuff there. Okay, all right. If anyone else is having trouble, please feel free to put in the chat right now. Let's see here. Can get users after post new users. Okay. Brian is having some problems with Docker Compose up -D. Art is helping Isaac. Tanya is helping Brian. What about everybody else? I definitely want to get a temperature check of where everybody's at. Like if you have gotten this to work so far, or if you are very stuck. Okay, Michelle can post a new user. Awesome. Have a couple people able to do with posting a new user. Okay, let's do this. Let's wait for maybe another minute to make sure that people are able to get these problems solved. That way we're not just leaving people in the dust. If you have already gotten to this point, here's what I'm going to have you do. What I want you to do is I want you to run this command, npm run test :sec in a new terminal window in the same repo that you have been working in this entire time. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to start SecTester. This will take a while. The reason is that there's actually a few reasons. So first off, the engine, the bright Dast engine needs to boot up. It needs to make an entire new engine. The second reason it's going to take a little while is because these tests need to run in sequence. They don't run concurrently. And you might ask like, well, why don't these tests run concurrently? The reason is because we're all on a free version. So if we were not on a free version, the tests would run concurrently and it would be far, far faster. Ironically, like this tool, again, it's in alpha, so we're just trying to get it to run like in a reasonable time frame, so like in a matter of minutes. But it will take a little while. So I want you to get started on running npm run test sec. Okay, let me just double check here in the chat. Unable to create an API key. Driver failed programming external connectivity. Tell me more. Okay, it looks like people are getting the help they need. Okay, let me just double check. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is, for a moment here, I want to go to our UI inside of Bright to show you that these tests that we're running are actually showing up on the scans. So as you can see, we just ran a test here called npm run test sec. And right here is actually, you can see it in the UI that it's actually running the test, which is pretty sweet. So far it's just told me that the elapsed time is 1 second. So it must have just booted up the engine and it's just running right now. So this is something you can do as you're like watching these tests run, is you can come here into the UI and see when the test will run, and what you can find in the meantime. Sometimes the test will not complete for like many minutes, but you can start to check like, oh, my first high vulnerability, let's go check that out. Oh, my first medium vulnerability, let's go check that out. Like I said, though, this is going to be a little bit buggy, so thank you everyone for your patience. In the meantime, though, let's make sure that we can help people out in the chat if they need to. Okay, looks like there's some stuff going on, which is good. Got the API key. Okay. Let's go back here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what you will see once the tests have finished running. So what you're going to see is you're going to see something like this result, like in this following screenshot. You're going to see a fail, which is good. You want to see a fail because this is a vulnerable application that has some issues in it. So we want the test to fail so that we know that the tests are actually working. So right here, you're going to see that issue found, target is vulnerable. You'll see where you can find the issue in the Bright UI if you want to go really in depth and get a lot of information. You'll see the name of the test and the severity is high. There's also going to be remediation suggestions for you. How it happened, like what does this mean? Like what is SQL injection? Like how did this happen to me? How did this happen to me? And what it means. And there's a lot of references then that will help you fix it. And that'll be what the entire test failing suite looks like. Okay, here we go. And here we are. Ta-da! Same exact thing that we just got here. So like I said, it does take a little bit of time. But considering that normally scans, especially with other scan companies, can take hours, this is pretty good that this took about 5 minutes. So yeah, there you have it. Let's talk about the actual anatomy of the test as well, unless people want me to go over that section again. If anybody wants me to go over that again, please put that in the chat, and then we'll talk about this whole thing, like the output of the test itself. Okay, I see one yes. Let's make sure that we have a couple more people definitely that want to go over it. Okay, let me ask it this way. Was there anything specifically that is confusing or that you want to go over? And if not, then I'll just kind of review it. Okay, cool. All right, let me just do another brief overview again. So what you'll see when this test fails, you're going to see a couple things. First off, you're going to see the issue in the Bright UI if you want to like actually take a look at where it is in the UI, so you can get more information. You'll have the name of the test and you'll have severity. Now, why is the severity high? Well, again, according to the OWASP top 10, they actually rank these issues as sort of high, medium, and low. And OWASP rates SQL injection as high. So that's why the severity of it is high. You can actually also change the test to break and do different things, like not break, but like break a build if you put this in your CI/CD. If the severity is like medium or higher or high or low or something along those lines. So that's also why we have it. Then we have remediation steps, which is pretty cool. So if you don't understand a lot about SQL injection, you can read these remediation steps and get some information about how to fix this problem. Then you can have some details here of how this test happened in the first place. And then a few more references down here where to go for some further reading. Okay. That is essentially the entire course of running a unit test. What I do want to show you, gosh, we only have 5 minutes left, but I do want to show you what an actual test looks like, so that it's not like what is going on. I want to see what an actual test looks like when you're running it. So can everybody see my code editor? Can you see my text editor? Okay, cool. Can you make it bigger? Yes, absolutely. All right, that's probably good. Yeah, probably good. Okay, cool. So these are pretty. The test pattern will follow this. VS Code is totally the best. The test pattern will follow this overall pattern. First off, we're going to have a describe, get ID. We're going to have a name. It should not have an SQL injection. We're going to create a test runner right here. And then right here on line 74 to 78, we are creating a scan. So this is kind of where we are building and booting up the Dast engine itself. Sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm seeing a bunch of questions over here on the side. So we're booting up the engine itself from line 74 to 70 to 78. And we're specifying the test type, which is SQLi or SQL injection. There's tons of different test types. It's probably a good idea that if you're going to name your test about having SQL injection, that you would use the SQL injection test type. I know that may seem obvious, but sometimes that doesn't happen just because we can be in a hurry or we just don't have that extra pair of eyes to catch us. So just watch out for that. On line 79, there's a threshold. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, that if you have this something like in a CI/CD build, if the severity was medium, you could like break the build. There's also a timeout. This is not necessarily like needed, but if the test runs for like over 5 minutes, you can say, forget it, like this test is taking too long. So just like stop the test if it's taking too long. And then here, the actual running of the test, the method is going to be get, and the URL that we are testing is base URL/users/1. Tanya, do you want to take over right here and talk a little bit about like looking at the code that this is testing?
Yeah, so since you're driving Akira, if we look at the results that are on the CLI, can you go back to that for a second?
Yeah, let me find it.
There we go. So when it says that there's an error, it says, so right under the word fail that's highlighted in red, then we see, so right near the top. Yeah, so then it says users and get, and it's trying to get the ID. And it's saying that it thinks there's SQL injection in there. So when we go to the code, we need to go to the place where we think that this command is going to be. And because, so we're in an we're testing an open source project on purpose to make sure we can find the things. So let me figure out where that is. So if we go to the code and then we go to source, and then I believe users, and there's users, was it the controller or was it the entity?
Yeah.
Oh, these are tests, actually.
Oops, my bad.
I think the second.
Oh, this is it. These are down here is these are the actual.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, so we can see that right actually where you happen to be hovering just above, it says get ID, and then it says return this users service dot find one. So can we go to that definition? Are you able to right click and get to that definition?
Yeah.
Constructor for this, is this the same? So the controller.ts. So where's the find one?
Let's find out. Let me do a control S. Find one.
So there's find all. Okay, there we go. Oh, but then it's just sending us to the same place as before. I'm a bit confused.
Okay. We're gonna figure it out.
I know it sounds weird, but because like I'm looking at it in GitHub and you're looking at it in
Visual Studio Code.
It's not the way I looked at it previously. So if we look in which file? So if we look at test and then sec, and then the user, just a second, let me just copy it for you. We can see where the test is running. And then I think that we found it from there.
Okay, SecTester, sec users, ed spec. Here we go. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
and so then in there we run the test. Second name expert tests get, sorry, I'm a little lost. Method get, we want base users. Yeah, so we want to get to that where we find the ID from the users. I look at one folder and you're looking at the other folder, and I have to say, I'm getting a little lost. So in source, and then I believe it was in users. And then what was the thing that we were looking for? Find one?
Users.service.ts is what one of the people just recommended. Maybe we should check that out. Here it is.
You know what I'm doing? I'm looking in the wrong project.
Oh, that'll do it. That'll do it.
I'm looking in the other demo that we did yesterday where we had found, anyway.
Here's to
Okay,
that.
so here it is in users.service. Yeah, so if we look at this, so we declare that it's named find one, so and like what it takes and what it's going to return, then we declare a constant. But then we're opening up a connection, and then we're immediately executing inline SQL. Okay, so what we're doing here is select star from users where ID equals, and then we're just pasting in user input. So this is called inline SQL, where we copy together a bunch of things to create a command, and then we send it directly to the SQL server to execute. This is really not good. It's not good for a few reasons. The first reason is we're getting the value that's fed directly into that function, and we haven't validated what we're receiving. So we don't even know if it's what we want. Like, it's probably a number because it's defined as number, but what if they put 10 billion in there instead of 12? So we need to validate that it's what we're expecting. Then we should not be sending it directly to the database like this. What we should be doing is calling a parameterized query. So we get the ID, we validate that it is what we're expecting. If it's not what we're expecting, we reject it. Then we should open the connection, add the parameters we plan to send to the parameterized query. Then we call the parameterized query. Then we close our connection. I'm also not seeing a close on the connection on this, which has me slightly nervous that maybe if we run this enough times, we'll have a whole bunch of connections open and we might crash from a bit of a memory leak. Does anyone see what I'm seeing here? Like, does that make sense that right now what we're doing is a really good recipe for SQL injection? But if we instead validate that user input, and then we also only use a parameterized query, so that would be something saved onto our database server as part of our database. Does anyone have questions on this? Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Questions are absolutely totally allowed, though. Okay. I guess once I finally figured out which project we were working in, I did all right.
Well, that's so many times.
Something in the broken crystals one.
Okay, Harpreet had a question. Closing connection, no. Do you want to maybe go over like what it means to close a connection?
So I have never written an app in Node.js, but generally if you open a connection, later you want to close the connection. And the reason for this is that, you might call this function 20, 30 times. We don't want to have 20 or 30 open connections to the database. We just want to have one, and then we close it. Can you update the code of what to, no. So we can't update the code today specifically because then we would have to have a copy of the Postgres database, and then we'd have to connect to that server, and then we would have to create a stored procedure or a parameterized query, I believe it's called. Mm-hmm. And then we would be able to call the parameterized query. So like, we don't have access to that right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. But
open, close for each request, not good. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure there's an open and a close. Don't we already have a commented our pre-written fix? Oh, okay, yeah.
We have like here, as you can see here, we have like something that uses an ORM, which is like, okay. So we had kind of like a good, better, best, but the best way to do is what Tanya just recommended, which unfortunately, like, again, because we don't have the access, we can't like make a stored procedure. But Tanya, do you want to go over like this section right here, like line 38 to 46?
Yeah, so you can also use what are known as query placeholders or name placeholders. I don't know Node.js, so I actually don't know this. Art, would you like to add? Because I haven't heard of a query placeholder. It sounds good, but I actually don't know this off by heart.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know this one by heart either.
An ORM is generally considered sort of like a framework that is an overlay to your database server. And the idea is that it adds security in each one of the function calls. It handles a lot of the security for you. Just like if you're doing JavaScript, if you use React or you use, there's a whole bunch of them, Vue.js, Angular, the framework will do a lot of the security for you. And so ORM frameworks that are sort of over top of a database, those add a bunch of the security. So I'm assuming that if we are using an ORM, that it has added security somehow to this, because basically what I still see does not look good to me because you're not validating the input. And you're still doing inline SQL. So I would definitely so the query parameters get escaped. Yes.
Yeah, the ORM,
Okay.
let me chime in. So ORM stands for Object Relation Model. So that means this handles the objects and how they should look like. And typically, if you use a well-established ORM library, they do a lot of the sanitation, validation, everything for you. So you don't need to worry about that. So instead of sending the query in a pure SQL string format, if you use the ORM, it will make sure that the inputs are sanitized properly.
Yeah. Good. Okay. I do want to be respectful of people's time. We are a little bit over. So let's maybe just open the floor up for some just general questions before we run into where we necessarily go into too much more detail on these things. If you have to get going, we understand. Thank you so much for your time. And let's maybe just stay for about 5-ish more minutes and we'll answer some more questions. Kamir wants to know the name. Go ahead.
They really want to know the name of your theme in VS Code. That has come up a few times that people think it's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I said it a really long time ago and I forgot the name. I know there's a way to look up themes and maybe I can see, let me see here. File icon theme, color theme, maybe. Okay. It's called Winter is Coming, Dark Blue. Yeah, Winter is Coming, Dark Blue. That's my theme. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah, Winter is Coming is pretty sweet. And yeah, Peter, I totally get it. Sometimes people like black better. Yeah, okay, cool. What other questions do people have? And I'm gonna put up here, we have like a couple of resources that we have for you. One last thing I will mention too is that Bright is looking for some company partners to partner with to tailor SecTester to your environment. So if you really liked this workshop and you want to give SecTester more kind of clout at your company and maybe integrate it into some of the things you're working on, hit us up, akira.brand@brightsec.com. You can just email me and maybe we can find some kind of cool partnership or common ground there. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Yes, you will definitely get a recording of this session. We will send it out along with the certificate of participation. So everyone is going to get one automatically that is going to be sent to the email you provided when you signed up. And yeah, if you want to take a picture of this slide that has all these resources on it, we'd love to see you in our Discord, love to hear from you on email, love to hear any kind of feedback you have. We'd love to see you on the We Hack Purple community. It's a free cyber community. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and I'll keep the room open for maybe like 2 more minutes. And yeah, we really appreciate your time. I hope you had a good time. It was a lot of fun just to like hack on stuff. It was a good time, I think. And you learned about app security and you had all these wins, and that was amazing. So congratulations everybody on all the wins that you got today. And thank you again so much for coming.